Hello, hello friends. In previous slide, we see the effect of pH on the enzyme activity. For example, pepsin and trypsin. The pepsin having 1 to 2 between the pH between the 1 to 2, and the trypsin is up to the neutral, having a neutral pH for the optimal result. The rate of reaction or velocity is directly proportional to the enzyme concentration which sufficient substrate is present. Next is the enzyme concentration. Next, next effect on the velocity is the enzyme concentration. Velocity is directly proportional to the concentration of enzyme. More the enzyme, faster is the reaction. Hmm. If the amount of enzyme double, the rate of reaction of is rate of the reaction enzyme is double. It is only for beginning of the reaction. It does not hold if the concentration is more, because the amount of substrate may not be sufficient to permit the maximum activity. Is that clear? The effect of enzyme concentration concentrate the activity with highly purified enzyme at a linear relationship between the amount of the enzyme and the amount of activity. Correct. When the amount of enzyme is much smaller than the concentration of the substrate, so that all the enzyme can combine with the latter. When an excess of enzyme is used, the velocity appears to be proportional to the square root of the enzyme concentration. Accumulation of the product in the reaction causes inhibition of enzyme activity. Right? Is same is the effect of substrate also. We can't say the when the substrate is more, the enzyme activity is more. No, substrate concentration increases, enzyme reaction increases. Very high substrate concentration, when the very high substrate concentration, the enzyme becomes saturated with the substrate. Lower otherwise in another condition, lower concentration of the substrate concentration is the limiting factor also. It may be the limiting factor. The velocity of an enzyme reaction increases as the concentration of substrate increases. The increase in the substrate concentration may increase or decrease the velocity of an enzymatic reaction. If the substrate concentration is small in proportion to the amount of enzyme, an increase in the substrate concentration will increase the velocity of the reaction. For example, the enzyme surface hydrolyzes the sucrose to glucose. An increase in the sucrose concentration up to 4 to 5% increase the velocity of hydrolysis. Above the concentration, the relative amount of sugar hydrolyzed become progressively less as the sugar concentration is increased. The time required for sucrose to be hydrolyzed is directly proportional to the concentration of the enzyme. Right? The rate of enzyme reaction does not increase beyond certain increase in the substrate concentration. Is that clear? At first it is almost linear, but as given in Km value, the reaction curves assume the hyperbolic nature. Right? See in that graph the action effect of substrate concentration on the rate of enzyme activity. The rate increases rapidly with the initial increase in the substrate. You see this curve? Further increase in the substrate concentration have no effect on the rate. The rate become independent on the substrate concentration. This is the maximum rate. Is the V max. Velocity is maximum at that dotted line. Right? Not every time you see the more the substrate concentration and the more the enzyme activity. No, effect of the substrate concentration on the rate of enzyme activity. This graph shows the enzyme activity at that the V max. This dotted line shows the maximum velocity. The rate increases rapidly with the initial increase in the substrate. Increase in the substrate concentration have a no effect on the rate at a Vmax. The rate becomes independent of the substrate concentration. Right? What is enzyme kinetics? The study of the reaction rate and how they changes the response to change in the experimental parameter. What is the kinetics? What is the rate of reaction? Rate of reaction and the velocity of the reaction is the same. The rate, speed, velocity is the same in the chemical reaction. Study of reaction rate and how they changes the response to change in the experimental parameter is known as the kinetics. The amount of substrate present in one of the key factor affecting the rate of reaction catalyzed by an enzyme in vitro. Right? Substrate concentration half the maximum velocity. This last graph shows the substrate concentration and the initial velocity. V0 is the initial velocity. This one is the in that case the upper side of this when the substrate concentration is high and the enzyme activity is completed, then there is no effect of the substrate concentration at that situation. Then that situation is the Vmax, means velocity is the maximum. But we see the curve of the increase in the substrate concentration at that half of of this curve. At that time the velocity is half of the total maximum velocity. You understand that the action in the first linear portion of the curves identifies the zero reaction. You see this enzyme substrate concentration of the rate of the enzyme activity. The rate increases rapidly with the increase in the initial substrate concentration. This shows these curves. Right? The velocity of an enzyme reaction increases as the concentration of substrate increases. The increase in the substrate concentration may increase or decrease the velocity of the enzymatic reaction. If the substrate concentration is small, the portion of the amount of enzyme and increase in the substrate concentration will increase the velocity of the reaction. Right? The H ion concentration uh, of the solution markedly affect on the activity of this enzyme. This is because the amino acid making up the active center of the enzyme must be in the proper ionization state in order to be active, or it may always be the active. Right? These are the factors: substrate concentration, temperature, pH, and enzyme concentration affect on the enzyme reaction or enzyme velocity. In the next lecture, we study the inhibitors of the enzymes. Okay, thank you. I believe ki all you are understand the enzyme effect of the enzymes.